Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to No Timeouts, a football show coming at you from the Score Studio. My name is Jonah Birenbaum. That is Dan Wilkins. That is Zach McDonald, filling in for our pal Tyler McKillop. And that is Justin Boone. You may not know Zach, but I assure you, you will come to love him. So, gentlemen, we have arrived at the season's halfway point. In fact, this week, we'll trudge into the proverbial back nine of the 2024 campaign, so to speak. Time flies when you're having fun, and no team right now, no fan base in the NFL right now, is having more fun than the Washington Commanders. Under rookie QB Jaden Daniels and new head coach Dan Quinn, the Commanders are 7-2. They're top 5 in the NFL in point differential, and they're on pace for their best season since 1991. I was born in 1991, and let me tell you, that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago, and outside of my birth, you know what else happened in 1991? Washington won the Super Bowl. Wow. So, I know, right?
Wow.
33 years removed then from their last title, Boone. Is this Washington team a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
I think they absolutely are, right? Like, you hit on some of it there, but they're one of only 4 teams that has 7 wins right now, so they're right up at the top of the league. They're 9th last time I checked in Super Bowl odds. I think that should be even higher. Jaden Daniels, an obvious star, and we've seen rookie quarterbacks come in before and just elevate their team and have long playoff runs, so that's definitely possible. But the big thing here, and the reason we're talking about them, is because they went in and made a huge trade at the deadline. They address a massive need at corner. They get a star in Marshawn Lattimore. That's going to make things so much easier on their defensive coordinator, Joe Witt Jr. I think that was the move that really told us they believe that they can do this, on top of all the vibes that we're hearing from everybody else around the league. And to bring in a corner like that when the NFC, the other contenders, they all have multiple good receivers when you're talking about the Lions and the Eagles and the Vikings. So, yes, absolutely, they are a contender. I think they're a team that is going to go deep into the playoffs. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I thought this was a bad team heading into the season, so I'm going to take the L on that. I think I wouldn't say Super Bowl contender. They're definitely a playoff team right now. The only thing that does give me a little bit of pause is the way that we've seen Cliff Kingsbury's offenses kind of fall off down the stretch before. I will say his offenses look much better than they have in years past, and if this continues, he might be a head coach again next year. That could happen, but yeah, that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause, but everything else about this team, there's a lot to like.
I wish that they also would have made a move for another receiver at the deadline. Yeah. I think that would have been really smart to have, Noah Brown being your second guy. And I know Daniels is so dynamic that he's going to lift that entire offense, and they have some pretty good depth at running back. Zach Ertz, tight end, he's kind of like the de facto number 2 in a way, but it would have been really nice to see them get in on the wide receiver sweepstakes and pull in one of those guys that got traded.
Yeah, but
I agree with you. I agree with you a lot on the Cliff Kingsbury offense. That worries me because Cliff does a really good job early on with teams. And we saw it with the Cardinals. Like, his development of Kyler Murray early on was amazing. He made Kyler look like an all-star quarterback. We kind of felt the same way about Kyler that we do about Jaden Daniels now. Mm-hmm. Not to the extent of Jaden Daniels, but pretty close. But he does a lot of like gimmicky kind of college stuff. And I think when you get into the playoffs, you're playing better defensive coordinators. You're playing better defenses. Mm-hmm. They're spending more time looking at what you're doing, and they can expose a lot of those things. And I think the other hiccup that you have is Jaden Daniels, first of all, rookie in the playoffs. You just don't know what's going to happen. Lamar Jackson, as great as he's been in the regular season, he's not been the same quarterback in the playoffs. It's a little bit tougher. Like I said, the defenses are a little bit better. You have to throw a little bit more, and you have to worry about Jaden Daniels' durability. He's already been injured this year. Yep. He's already missed time for Marcus Mariota. He's obviously like a really slender guy. As he grows on in his career, he's going to get bigger. He's going to gain more muscle. He's going to work with the trainers, but he could not be available. And the second he's not available, it is over for the Commanders.
Yeah. Although regardless, they'll have a former Heisman Trophy winner under center, so that bodes well for Washington.
It's true.
Great points, lads. Let's now look at a team at the opposite end of the good vibes / optimism spectrum, the New Orleans Saints. So 2 games into the year, they looked like a burgeoning NFC powerhouse. They looked like they could do no wrong under new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. Fast forward to week 10, and they are flailing. They have not won a game since week 2. They're 2-7, fresh off a loss to the Carolina Panthers, a loss that was the final nail in the coffin for Dennis Allen, their head coach. He is no longer their head coach. Mardi Gras is officially canceled. I read that too earlier today. Wilkie, just how bad are things in New Orleans right now?
Look, there are a lot of bad teams in the NFL. The Saints are just one of many, but when you zoom out and look at the entirety of this situation and where things are headed, I don't know that it gets any worse than this. I think with a lot of bad teams, you can look at it and say, okay, we're going to have the opportunity to reset in the offseason. We can reset the roster, new head coach. You mentioned it. The Saints are going to start that process by hiring a new head coach in the offseason. But what I'm wondering is what self-respecting, highly touted coach is going to take this job? Because this is one of the worst situations I've ever seen. This is a team that's been so poorly mismanaged, dating all the way back to the Sean Payton era, where year after year, we find them in these truly insane salary cap situations. This year alone, again, like we've seen for the past 5 years, I think they're about $61 million over the projected salary cap for 2025.
That's wild.
It's getting harder and harder to pull
It's
that
like
off.
40 million of that is Taysom Hill for some reason.
Exactly. And some people are going to try to tell you that the salary cap is fake. Please do not listen to them. It is very much real. Of course, teams can create some flexibility for themselves in the short term. That's a real thing with the cap. But this situation that we have with the Saints is the reality of them pushing money to the future again and again and again with no real plan. They have so consistently kicked the can down the road on their biggest contracts that the only way for them to create the space needed for next year to get under the cap is to restructure contracts already on the roster, to push more money to the future and effectively recommit to a bunch of players that probably shouldn't be on the roster anymore. You look at the example of Derek Carr. I believe he has a $51 million cap hit next year, and all the work the Saints need to do to get under the cap, they might have to restructure him and to commit to him for another few years.
Oh, no.
At a time where
Mike Thomas will be furious.
Yeah, at a time where they need to obviously be trying to identify their quarterback of the future, right? So I just don't see a situation where this team gets better anytime soon, and I don't know who wants to be a part of it. So it's going to be a rough few years.
The Derek Carr fact, the fact that they can't get out of that is genuinely terrifying, because I do agree with you that they're in the worst spot they've been, but also they're kind of in a good spot in terms of like they've just been in hell for like so many years. Like since Drew Brees left, they've just been running the like Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, like all these.
Are you saying that that's good?
No, I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying. I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel to get out of that.
Okay.
It's starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, Dennis Allen is gone. Mickey Loomis, like you're starting to hear like whispers that like maybe he doesn't want to do this anymore. That guy's trying to sign Zion Williamson to be like a defensive end, like concerned with the Pelicans. It's like maybe we can get out of that regime and like actually tear it down and actually have a real team, because it's been a long time since Drew Brees has left, and they've been doing this same just like milquetoast team over and over again. And that's, as a fan, that's what you want to avoid.
Yeah, and here's the problem. Again, going back to the contract situation, to get under the cap for next year, they're going to have to restructure like 10 different guys. Yeah. Recommit to them. That's just to get under the cap, let alone to create space to make more moves. So you do that. That creates a situation where in 2026, they're going to be looking at the same thing they're looking at now. It's going to be another $50, $60, $70 million over the cap. It's just, there's really no way out of this other than to just at some point take the L, but they've created this situation where there's just no recovering from what they've done. So it's going to be a long road back.
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I agree with you. I do feel like we need to point out, though, that since those first two games, there's been so many injuries on this team, right? Like the receiving core just got decimated. They got injuries pretty much across the board, the offensive line at one point. So like that factors in here too. I would have liked to have seen what they would have been had all those guys stayed healthy. Would they have at least been competitive? I certainly don't think they were what we thought they might have been after the first two games. And one of those,
they got to play the Cowboys, right?
Well, they played the Panthers in the opening week,
they
right?
were that after the first 2 weeks.
After the first 2 weeks, I think we were much more excited about them. Like
we all
Tyler
were.
sat
Like
on
you personally.
I did think that I'm not going to be like some incredible team at the top of the league, but I thought they were legit as a playoff team at that point.
Could potentially win the NFC South, we thought, too, especially because the Falcons looked rough out of the gate.
Yeah, but I think any team, if you throw the kind of injuries that they've had this year, is going to fall off in the way that they have, right? So I just think that's worth noting. But what you're talking about is more salary cap long term. Like it needs to get a lot worse before it gets better here. And it's probably going to, unfortunately, for Saints fans.
And injuries alone can't account for the fact that since week 3, they have the second worst point differential in the NFL at -84. The only team worse than them is the Carolina Panthers. And I got to say, I got to shout them out. Tyler, on the 4th episode of No Timeouts, predicted that the Saints would finish this season with the worst record in the NFL. 2 weeks in, we were laughing in his face, but we got to give the guy some props because it's very conceivable that they do finish the season with the worst record in the NFL. Let's cleanse the palate a bit, shall we? We need a little bit more good team discourse. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions. They are unquestionably the best team in the NFC. They are arguably the best team in the entire NFL, and yet, Zachy, if you were running the show in Detroit, you'd be making a change to their coaching structure. You want to see offensive coordinator Ben Johnson replace Dan Campbell as head coach. Why?
It's one of those things, like, I'm not trying to say that Dan Campbell's doing a bad job. You know what I mean? I think Dan Campbell's doing a great job. Obviously, he's kind of came in, he changed the culture, he did all of these things. He's a great guy. We love the clips. We love all this stuff. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing that helps you as a football team is having an advantage strategically over another team. And they kind of remind me of the Super Bowl Falcons. You remember that team?
How could we forget? 28-3.
28-3. We can never forget. And they had Matt Ryan, who had like an MVP season. Jared Goff is having like an MVP season right now. They had Dan Quinn, who is actually a really good coach. Dan Quinn is a really good coach. He did a great job in Atlanta, like eventually got fired. He's doing a great job in Washington now. But who was their offensive coordinator? It was Kyle Shanahan. and if you could go back right now, if you were the Atlanta Falcons and you could go back at the end of that season and say, hey, we're going to fire Dan Quinn. The fan base is going to be mad. People are going to be upset, but we're going to promote Kyle Shanahan to be offensive coordinator. The Atlanta Falcons would have been one of the best teams in the league up now until this day. They'd be doing exactly what the 49ers are doing. And the Detroit Lions have that chance right now to do the right thing, to make history in the right way, to beat convention. It's this weird rule that you just can't fire a good head coach, even if you have a better guy, and they need to do it at the end of the season. Don't let them walk away. Let them cook with Jared Goff. The biggest privilege that you can have in the NFL is continuity, and its scheme continuity is more important than anything, and they can have that with Ben Johnson. They got to fire Dan Campbell.
What
I love
an
this take.
incredible take to make your debut on the show.
I love this take.
Ease into the show like an old man into a warm bath.
Yeah.
He's coming in, guns blazing. I love it.
He's coming in trying to overtake Tyler, I think. He's trying to take his spot, just like he wants Ben Johnson to. No, I think the one thing that we need to mention here, though, well, it's never going to happen.
Absolutely not. No.
Zero chance that it's going to happen. But
which is
there,
crazy.
There are a lot of good coordinators who aren't good head coaches. And yes,
For
Kyle
sure,
Shanahan's
for
an
sure,
example
for sure.
that turned out to be a good head coach. I know some people debate that, but I think he's a good head coach. I love the setup that they have with the Lions. I love the idea of having this like rah-rah head coach and then two incredible coordinators.
Totally.
The factor that people really need to think about here is, and it happened with the Falcons as well, how long can you keep those coordinators? Because they end up eventually getting those head coaching jobs, and it's probably going to happen with Ben Johnson. It's probably going to happen with Aaron Glenn, and then we're going to get to see at that point how good of a coach is Dan. How much rah-rah kneecap biting can you do to get your team going when you don't have those coordinators? But so far, they've managed to keep them around, and I think they have a very good chance to win the Super Bowl with them this year, and that's great. That's really exciting.
Yeah, let me just reiterate: absolutely never going to happen. but the point that you make is true. Like, I do think that Ben Johnson is more important to the Lions' success long term than Dan Campbell is, and they probably are going to lose him this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they rebound. But yeah, that said, again, never going to happen. But maybe they'll all win the Super Bowl together this year.
The NFL is a league of innovation. It's a league that, like,
well, it should be.
It should be, and it is a lot of times. You look, like, constantly schemes are changing. Like, it's like the running game's more important now than ever. But like 5 years ago, we were like, the passing game is the only thing that matters. And it's like, they're not afraid to change the rules and like try different things out. And it's like some team needs to step up at some point and say, we're not going to do this just because it's the right thing to do. I also think about like Minnesota. Even here's an alternative. It's like, can you pay Ben Johnson head coach money? Or like in Minnesota, you have Flores and you have O'Connell. O'Connell's an amazing coach. Flores is an amazing coach. Flores is probably going to be hired as a head coach somewhere. Why can't he just be? Why don't they say, we're going to pay you guys the same money and just keep doing this? And like, don't Brian Flores, don't go to some team where you're going to have to draft a crappy quarterback and get fired and 3 years later become a defensive coordinator. It's like, I would just like to see a little innovation in the way that we arrange our coaching staffs.
There's no like salary cap on coaches' salaries, right?
Totally.
Like, so why not? Yeah.
And I agree with the broader point that teams generally should be more innovative and less risk averse when it comes to making coaching decisions. This is not the team to do it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
This is the best Lions team of the Super Bowl era.
Yeah.
They are arguably the best team in the NFL right now. Never going to happen in a million years.
But we respect the take.
I love the
absolutely.
take.
Absolutely. We haven't even gotten to bold predictions yet, but he's jumping the
Yeah,
gun.
I'd love to
And
see
you'd
what he
love to
has
see
cooked
it.
up for that.
All right, fellas, moving on. I know we've talked about the Indianapolis Colts a lot in recent weeks. That's probably because there's so much divergence of opinion on this show about what they should do with Anthony Richardson. Should Joe Flacco be starting over their struggling second-year QB? Well, with Flacco under center this past Sunday, making his first start as Indy's official starter, the Colts offense turned in one of their worst performances of the entire season in a 21-13 loss to Minnesota. Wilkie, as an Anthony Richardson believer, apologist, stan, whatever word you want to use, did the Colts' uninspiring offensive performance this past Sunday give you a little bit of schadenfreude?
Look, I'm very happy that we're taking the opportunity to talk more about Anthony Richardson now that Tyler's not on the show right now because, he's my biggest resistance there. Look, I have talked about it a lot here. I've written about it multiple times on the Score app that's available on iOS and Android for free, by the way.
Wow.
Listen,
man.
Good plug.
I thought this was a joke of a decision. I thought it was truly ridiculous that you're going to sit down Anthony Richardson for Joe Flacco. You really running the risk of compromising the development of the most important person in your organization. Obviously, the rationale was Joe Flacco gives us the best chance to win. Like you said, how'd that work out for them?
Yeah.
I guess he completed more passes, which was the point of everyone's obsession. Cool. But he led all of 2 field goal drives. The Colts had, I believe, their worst offensive EPA per play of the season. So the results weren't just around the same or better. They were probably worse. I just don't get it. Boone might do the schedule thing to me and say that they were playing the Vikings defense. But honestly, if you look at this game, I don't see how Anthony Richardson's athleticism is not helpful to them in a way where he's at least helping the run game or, his creativity in the pass game, extending plays helps them out against a tough opponent. I just don't get it. You zoom out to the full picture of the situation. I don't see how Anthony Richardson is learning anything sitting on the sidelines watching Joe Flacco play mediocre football. He started 13 games in college. He started 10 games in the NFL. He's got to play. Just play the kid. That's all I want.
Yeah, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know how dedicated Anthony Richardson is or what the locker room feels. You hear little reports come out. But I think this could potentially go back to what you were just saying, where you have some guys who are really good coordinators. And this was the first time when I started to question, wait, is Shane Steichen just a good coordinator and not a very good head coach? Because it seemed like a terrible decision to make this move. We both agreed on that before it happened. And after last week's game, it certainly looks like we were right so far.
Yeah, and I think the point that is glaringly obvious is that whether Anthony Richardson is under center or Joe Flacco is under center, this Colts team has no chance of winning the Super Bowl this year. They need to be prioritizing Anthony Richardson's development. Let him take his lumps. Let him be a more formed quarterback next season. I will say in Joe Flacco's defense, that is a really tough defense to go up against. They've held opposing QBs to a QB rating of less than 82 this year. And also, when Anthony Richardson faced a defense almost as blitz-heavy as Minnesota's in Houston a couple weeks ago, he completed 10 of 32. So, it's not like Anthony Richardson would have necessarily fared better against this, pretty, staunch Vikings defense. But I think the broader point is that they're not winning the Super Bowl this year. You need to prioritize his development.
Yeah, I think
there's another point. Anthony Richardson stinks.
Yeah, he is Tyler. Tyler.
I didn't think we had Tyler on the show.
I know, it's unbelievable.
I'm filling in for Tyler.
Where's the sign? Is it still back there?
Yeah.
But how
he's
can you
terrible. He couldn't throw in college. He can't throw in the pros. He can't throw the football. You could put him out there a million times in a row, and it's just obvious at this point. He just can't throw the football. And it's nothing to do with the injury thing, all that kind of stuff. You can overlook all of that things. He's not good at making the pigskin go from his hand to the other guy's hands. That's what he can't do.
Okay, let me ask you, how did you feel about Josh Allen after his first year as a starter?
I hated Josh Allen. I thought he sucked.
Interesting.
But how many Josh Allens have there been? One. Josh Allen has literally ruined the way that we evaluate quarterbacks because everybody, like, you see it every team, every time you're like in the fantasy football group chat and there's like you're like making fun of the guy with like the crappy quarterback, he like pulls up the like stat graphic that compares him to like Josh Allen through his first 2 years. And it's like, yeah, we could also pull up similar stats between every bust that's ever happened and Josh Allen, and they would be exactly the same. It's like, Josh Allen is the outlier of all outliers.
The
I
exception
think
that proves
Wilkins
the rule.
does have to, based on what we've seen from Anthony Richardson so far, I do think we got to give up the Josh Allen potential. That's his ceiling. But but I want to mention one other thing. If you draft a guy where you drafted Anthony Richardson, and then think about how he did get hurt last year, he is essentially still a rookie. He's basically not even played half of a season, and you've given up on him. How many franchises do that? How many franchises draft a guy in the first round and give up on them after half of their rookie season? It's just a bad decision.
This is not analogous to Bryce Young. Like, these situations are different, and I think he deserves a more extended look.
To your point about the upside of this season, they were not winning the Super Bowl. If Joe Flacco was better, which I think as we saw this week, he's not that much better, but let's say he was, the ceiling for the season was still like a wild card appearance. So what are we doing there? What are we accomplishing for the future of the franchise? So,
but also think about this too when we mention like behind the scenes kind of stuff. If I'm the receivers on that team, do I want Joe Flacco out there because I'm looking to get my money? I'm looking to get paid.
Well, Anthony Richardson's not going to get you
I
paid.
want a salary.
Man. When he can't complete an intermediate pass.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, right.
Are they the ones pushing? Is that the kind of thing that happens behind the scenes where guys are going like, let's get Flacco out there because I want to put up stats so that I get a new contract down the road? Like, those things could be factored in.
That's absolutely it. That's got to be it. Like, I think that's what it boils down to. I think it's the coaches. The coaches want to have something on their resume for when they get fired at the end of the year. The players want to be able to have something so that when they all get cut, they're able to go to other teams and be able to pitch themselves and like sign contracts. And I don't think that that's like necessarily wrong. Like, these guys are providing for their family as well as anybody else. And Anthony Richardson is not performing. They're not going to be there at the end of the year, and they have to figure out what are the best moves for them. And if they thought Anthony Richardson had a chance to be good, I wish it was like back in the day when coaches like never got fired. They'd be there for like 10 years no matter what, and you could like really let these guys develop. But it's just not the landscape of the NFL anymore. It's you're going to get cut, you're going to get let go, and I think that exactly what you said is the reason why they're doing it.
I can't wait for next week's 15-minute segment on Anthony Richardson as well.
Look, sometimes business decisions need to be made, and they're made over football decisions. Moving on, there's a subject that we have to revisit. I know we talked about this just a couple weeks ago, but the Chiefs remain undefeated at the season's halfway point, improving to 8-0 with an overtime thriller over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday night. This team has now won 14 consecutive games dating back to last season, and no matter what adversity comes their way, they just keep finding ways to win. Zach, we asked Boone a couple weeks ago. I'm going to ask you now. Is this Chiefs team going to go undefeated?
I think they are going to go undefeated. I think, again, to make another analogy to a team of the past, an obvious one, they kind of remind me of the Patriots in the sense that the Patriots would, especially during the later Tom Brady years when he was just like really smart and really on top of things, they would kind of figure out their team for the first half of the season. They would try some different things. They would cut some guys. They would bring some guys in. And you've seen the Chiefs doing that with bringing in Hopkins, or like they shuffle around the running backs. They like bring in Kareem Hunt. They figure out their identity. And last year, I think what people didn't realize that was so impressive about the Chiefs Super Bowl win was Patrick Mahomes became the best game manager quarterback in all of football. He was an elite game manager because he had a great defense. They have the best defensive play caller. And Mahomes has that Brady thing at the end of the game where he's just going to make all the right calls. He's going to make all the right decisions. Andy Reid, his entire career, his biggest flaw, the reason why he couldn't win Super Bowls with the Eagles was he was horrible with the clock at the end of the games. He would call timeouts in bad situations. He wouldn't hold on to the ball long enough. And Mahomes has completely nullified that with his football intelligence on the field, which I think is better than any other player in the entire league. And if you have that, we're going to play good defense, we can run the ball, our Patrick Mahomes is going to have some 5 touchdown games. And at the end of the game, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if you make one wrong move, you will lose the game. And the Bucs lost it last week, and I think every other team's going to lose it for the rest of the year as well.
I think, what is it, week 11 against the Bills that I mentioned a few weeks ago? Help us, Buffalo. You are our only hope. You are the one that needs to stop this.
It is the Bills. That's the game.
But I'm at the point now where I feel like the only teams that can beat Kansas City are the ones that are in contention for best team in the league. That's Baltimore. That's Detroit. They've already played Baltimore and beaten them. They don't play Detroit. And I just don't think the Bills are in that conversation. The Bills have lost to the only two good teams they've played this year. So I'm sorry to tell you, Boone, but I also see them going undefeated because I don't know, between Patrick Mahomes and this defense, how can you beat them?
Here, I'm going to give you all an opportunity for a clip to bring back in the future, good or bad. They will lose to the Chargers down the stretch.
Wow.
Look, the opportunity.
That's a really interesting call.
Yeah.
Actually, that is a really interesting matchup. The way the two teams play football.
To be clear, they're probably still going to go to the Super Bowl, but I just think that if you're going to pick out the ones that these juggernauts are going to lose, it's probably going to be to the division teams that know them well.
Yeah.
And like I said before the season, which nobody gave me credit for, the Chargers are a good team. They're going to be a playoff team, I think. So I think they're a nice matchup for the Chiefs.
And they play that if the Chargers win, it's going to be some 18-16 run the ball Jim Harbaugh.
Their defense has been awesome.
Their defense has been awesome.
And they're letting Herbert throw more now. Since the bye week, they've kind of taken to the air a little more. And Herbert's the kind of quarterback, he's actually good, right?
Yep.
He could go toe-to-toe with them.
Yep. Absolutely. We'll see. I'm sure we'll revisit this in 3 weeks, after they beat the Bills. Amazingly, we haven't said anything about the trade deadline deals yet. There were 8 deals that went down on Tuesday, including several that Dan Wilkins predicted, like Zadarius Smith to Detroit and Mike Williams to Pittsburgh. So shout out my man D-Wilk. The deal I want to focus on was the Cowboys trade for wide receiver Jonathan Mingo from Carolina. Dallas gave up a 4th-round pick for a second-year wide receiver who has yet to record a 70-yard game in the NFL, has yet to catch a passing touchdown in the NFL. In other words, they gave up a more valuable pick than Kansas City gave up for DeAndre Hopkins and a higher pick than Baltimore did for Deontay Johnson. And this comes not too long after Dallas got fleeced in the Amari Cooper trade with Cleveland. Boone, why are the Cowboys so bad at trades?
I don't know. You didn't mention Trey Lance for a 4th-round pick. They could use all of these picks and even the value they're getting in these trades. It's just terrible. I don't understand it. I think all we can go back to here is they need a GM. They need an actual GM. Jerry Jones is not the answer. The Joneses are not the answer. And I would say the success that this team has had, they've been built as sort of a regular season team. We talked before the season about how they can do well in the regular season. When they get to the playoffs, they all fall apart. They're not a contender each year. I think we just look at this and we go, we need changes in that organization. Is it going to happen? Again, it's kind of like what you said with the lines. No, there's no way that they're going to bring in an actual GM for this team. I don't get it. You talked about Jonathan Mingo. Every single metric, basically, that you look at for receivers over the last couple of years, he is near the bottom of every category, any list you look at. So I don't get it. I don't have an answer. I was kind of hoping I was going to come on the show and somebody else was going to be able to explain it to me because it is just so bad. And I would say the success that the Cowboys have had, because people could make the argument, well, they've been to the playoffs 3 years in a row before this. I would say the success that they've had has been in spite of the Joneses and not because of them.
I mean, I don't know if you guys saw this report, but apparently on trade deadline day, Jerry Jones was seriously considering trading CeeDee Lamb for some magic beans. I don't know if you guys saw that. It didn't materialize, but it was on the table at the very least. Finally, then, before we move on, the Chicago Bears. That locker room is tense right now. So they've lost 2 in a row to drop to 4-4, and head coach Matt Eberflus has maybe potentially lost the room. DJ Moore wouldn't say that he hadn't when he was asked about it. And one of the key drivers here is the relationship between Eberflus and his rookie quarterback Caleb Williams. Doesn't seem like that relationship's in the best place right now. So Zach, you're a newly married man. You're the closest thing this show has to a relationship expert. Is there any advice or counsel you'd care to give these two? And Adrian, we can cue the lights here for this segment because I think...
Oh, wow.
He's about to lock in and give them some really trenchant
So much
advice.
romance in here. I have been married for 2 or 3 weeks now, so I'm obviously the only one who knows about relationships. And I was thinking a lot about this relationship. I was thinking, you ever been to one of those weddings where you get invited, you go there, all your friends are there, the family's there, you're looking around, and then you start to really think about the relationship. You see those two people walking down the aisle, and you realize to yourself immediately, these people are getting divorced. That is the relationship that Matt Eberflus and Caleb Williams have had. They haven't followed what needs to be followed in a relationship. I've got some bullet points out of my weeks of experience in marriage that are important to think about when you're getting married. And the first one is align values early. That's what we want to do, right? The tough part about Eberflus and Caleb Williams, this is an arranged marriage. They didn't choose each other. You can tell. They did not choose each other. But they didn't align the values. Eberflus is a defensive coach who kind of stinks at being a head coach. And Caleb Williams is a really good, futuristic offensive player. That does not align. The Chicago Bears should have fired Eberflus before the season. There was never a more obvious situation that wasn't going to work out than this, and they couldn't do it. The second point is to establish healthy communication. I don't know if you guys watched Hard Knocks this year, but there was a Hard Knocks segment that they would do every week. Caleb Williams and Matt Eberflus, after the preseason game, they would sit in a room kind of like awkwardly far away from each other and just like have a conversation. And like Caleb Williams is like dressing in outfits that like are so cool that I don't understand them. And Matt Eberflus is like your like grandpa who's like told you the same story 19 times in a row every year at Thanksgiving and does it over again. And there is just no communication. Caleb Williams is looking away from him. It's not working. And this is the last one. This is the last relationship tip that I want. And it's mostly for Eberflus. Prepare for the worst. There used to be like a common thing on Reddit. I don't know if you guys have been on Reddit on like the dating advice things where like somebody would do like some long post like, oh, my wife or my husband did this. They cheated on me, blah, blah, blah. And people would be like, oh, like time to hit the gym and lawyer up. It is time to hit the gym and lawyer up for Matt Eberflus. At the end of the game, if he's playing a team with a bad defense, he needs to slip his resume into the pocket of the opposing GM. He is getting a defensive coordinator job next year. It's time. Fill out the resume. Keep the cool haircut. Start networking. It's not going to happen. It is over for these guys.
Wow.
I love it.
That's
inspiring.
Wild. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Look, I have nothing to add in terms of the relationship advice. I think you nailed all of it. The one thing that I do want to touch on, though, is they absolutely should have fired him before the season. And we mentioned it last week. I don't know if you watched the show, but there was a report that Ben Johnson was eyeing this job. He wanted this job last offseason.
That's insane.
Now, again, it might work out. They might just end up getting him anyway. But after another year of like dysfunction with the Bears, does the job maybe seem a little less attractive to him? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, the schedule guy's coming in for a second here. I'm
Ooh,
going to tell
here we
you,
go.
they are absolutely going to be firing him soon. They play the Patriots this week, so maybe they get a win in that game. After that, they have the hardest strength of schedule the rest of the season by far. Like, it's not even close. It's just one tough team after another.
It's like all NFC North.
I think even if they win this game, I mean, if they lose this game, they're seriously in trouble. If they win this game, after that, it's going to go off the rails very quickly when they start playing these other teams.
We'll see what happens. Things are not boding well for Eberflus, but, you know, anything can happen in relationships, right? Yeah, exactly. You know, you just want them to be happy. You want them both to be happy and be fulfilled. Let's move on. Fellas, I've said it before, I'll say it again. We're at the halfway point, which means it's bold prediction time. I want to know what wild stuff you guys foresee going down over the next couple months. Wilkie, hit me with a bold prediction for the second half of this season.
You said earlier that the Chiefs are going to go undefeated. The Lions are 7-1 now, so that's not possible for them. But I'm going to say that they're not going to lose another game for the rest of the regular season. Wow. If we can pull up the schedule on the screen here, I don't know if that's possible.
Wait, are you stealing my shtick here?
Yeah, I'm going
it's
full,
a good bit. It's
full
a good
schedule
bit.
mode here.
Yeah.
We'll get it pulled up here. Look,
You
it's
can also
not.
find it on the Score app.
Yeah, it's not
iOS,
the easiest schedule. Texans a tough matchup this week. Packers, Niners, Vikings. There are a lot of good teams on that list there, but none of them are as good as the Lions are. This is the most complete team in football to me. And really, it's not even about measuring up who's better than the Lions on the schedule. The reality is we see upsets in the NFL all the time, but the Lions don't give you a lot of opportunity to sneak up on them because they just don't make mistakes. Jared Goff has 24 incompletions over their 6-game win streak. The Lions have 28 touchdowns over that time span.
That's crazy.
They are the best team in the league to me. I think they run the table the rest of the regular season, and honestly, at this point, I think they probably run the table in the playoffs too. I got them winning the Super Bowl. So
Wow. All right, you heard it here first. Booney, what's your bold prediction?
I don't even know if this was bold enough after when I thought about it, because each year so many coaches get fired. But going back to what we were just saying, I think we're going to see by the end of the season 5+ more coaches get fired here. I think some of them are going to happen pretty soon. Like Doug Peterson's the one that everyone has been waiting on, right? And their schedule coming up. It's Vikings this week, and it sounds like Trevor Lawrence isn't going to be playing. And then the Lions next week, and then a bye. He's not going to survive those 2 games, right? He's going to be gone soon. Mike McCarthy, constantly mentioned as a potential coach getting fired on the hot seat, and now no Dak Prescott for at least 4 weeks, potentially for the rest of the season. I see no reason why they would bring Dak back. CeeDee Lamb banged up. We don't know if he's going to play this week, so that's a possibility. He could be gone soon. Other guys, I mean, we could just go through it. Antonio Pierce and the Raiders. I'm sorry, Wilkie, but
he gone.
that's got to happen, right? He's made some really public mistakes, right? With different players, like the Devontae Adams thing.
Have you seen the like coaching staff that they have? It's like the most absurd roster of Marvin Lewis is there, like Norv Turner is in the fold,
Tony Dungy's coming back.
Yeah, Tony Dungy. Yeah. It's like it is the most wild, like Madden 2009 coaching staff that I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, we
Don't
can
forget
keep
Joe
going, too.
Philbin.
Like
Joe Philbin wasn't even good.
Eberflus, we just talked about, right? I think he's going to be gone before the end of the season. Then you got a bunch of guys like Kevin Stefanski, who I think is an okay coach, but is he going to end up being the fall guy for the Deshaun Watson thing?
Not his fault.
Could potentially be the case, right? Brian Dable, the Giants ownership has said that no, they're going to keep him, but if they finish the season poorly, I think there's a good chance he could be gone. Yeah. Shane Steichen, even before the season, I wouldn't have said that, but with the way that's been handled. So there are going to be a ton of coaches that are going to get fired. And I mean, is it every year where it's like almost a quarter of the league? I think it's going to be up around that number this year.
Wow. Yep. It's not that hard to see. Zach, bold prediction.
I think I have Joe Burrow winning the MVP this year. Mm-hmm. I think Joe Burrow. This is obviously a bold prediction. It's like Joe Burrow right now, I think is the last time I checked was the 6th odds leader to win MVP. He's currently 2nd in the NFL, tied with Lamar with 20 touchdowns. And the MVP is narrative driven, right? And it's narrative driven towards the end of the season. So even, you're talking about the Lions going undefeated for the rest of the season. It's like by the time the end of the season rolls down, like I could see Goff sitting out the last game. I could see them kind of playing a different style of football. Joe Burrow is going to need to go balls to the wall to the end for the Bengals to make the playoffs. And if he gets the Bengals to make the playoffs and he has, even if you doubled his numbers now, 40 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, that's going to be a really good resume to be an MVP. It kind of boils down to literally tonight. Like if the Bengals can go and beat the Ravens tonight, then you start to with the wild card thing too. Now it's weird. There's like one bad team makes it because they put that extra wild card on. If they beat the Bengals, if they beat the Ravens tonight, I think Joe Burrow is the MVP of the NFL.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that would bring them back to 500, and then the path to a postseason berth is that much more viable.
Would certainly help if T. Higgins gets back out there at some point.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
For real.
Do you guys know the last player to win the MVP while his team missed the playoffs? This is just a random trivia question.
No.
It was 50 years ago.
50 years ago?
Yeah. He's not best known for this.
I have no idea. Is it like Earl Morrall?
No, is it O.J. Simpson?
It is. Yeah. 1973, he won the MVP despite his team missing the playoffs. So, if the Bengals do end up missing the postseason, Joe Burrow will definitely have the odds stacked against him. But, man, he is playing the best quarterback of his career right now, which is saying a lot. Career best in total QB rating. I believe he's 3rd or 4th in the league in EBA per play. What a season he's having. It's a shame that Cincinnati's defense is made out of Swiss cheese. Wilkie.
And, hey, it makes sense. O.J. Simpson, very good at winning the popular vote. So.
Moving on. Wilkie. Give me one more bold prediction.
I've got the Cowboys ending up with a top 5 pick. I mean, there was a lot of skepticism about this team heading into the season. Maybe they hadn't done enough to get back to the playoffs. I don't think anyone really saw them being this bad. And Boone mentioned it. They're banged up now. Dak's going to probably miss more than a month. And then you add in the factor in the rest of the schedule. It's a pretty tough closing stretch of the season. I think they may only end up with 1 or 2 more wins the rest of the way. They could be a 4 or 5 win team. So yeah, they might have their first top 5 pick since taking Ezekiel Elliott in 2016. Taking running backs that high isn't really cool anymore, but this is the Ashton Genty year, so maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Specifically, the 8th toughest strength of schedule the rest of the season. Just had to do that. Got to keep the schedule
guy
thing going.
Trademark it.
He doesn't miss. This guy doesn't miss.
Luda's going to a dark basement to stare at the schedule.
That's what he does. We just bring him out for the show, and he goes right on back. Boone,
that's sadly almost true. Yeah.
Boone, one more bold prediction.
This one might be a little bit crazy, and I'm probably going to need some help for this to actually happen, but I think Nico Collins is still going to lead the league in receiving yards, despite the fact that he has been on IR for 4 weeks, and he's potentially going to come back this week. There's a lot of things we could look at here, right? Before he left, before he got hurt, he was leading the league in receiving yards. Right now, he is 14th in receiving yards, despite the fact that he has missed 4 games.
That's crazy.
Right? He's I believe 96 yards out of third place, 150 yards out of second place, and then 216 behind Justin Jefferson, who's in first place. So probably going to need a Justin Jefferson injury. He's probably going to have to miss a couple games for Nico to do that. But now we have Stephon Diggs out for the rest of the season. And Nico has shown people this year he belongs up in that category with those legit high-end receivers. So I think he is going to have a great finish to the season. I think he's going to cement himself as one of the best receivers in the league. And I think if we get a little bit of help, if Justin Jefferson maybe sits out a game, let's say at the end of the year, that sort of thing, I think Nico Collins is just going to go ham the rest of the way.
Man, I like that call. Before he got hurt, when he was still sharing targets with Stephon Diggs, he was averaging almost 11 per game, and you look at his numbers, he leads the NFL in yards per routes run, and Houston throws the ball so much. They're averaging like 35 pass attempts per game. I like that call, man. I like it a lot. Who do we got? Zachy, you got the last one. One more bold prediction, man.
All right, this one is definitely I wanted to bookend. I wanted to start with the hot take, and I wanted to end with the hot take.
Love it.
Oh boy.
And this one is that Deion Sanders will be an NFL head coach before the Super Bowl this year. I believe that Deion is making it to the NFL. I saw this recently. There was like a tweet. I think it's probably fake, but I am going to take it as real anyway. And it was that every Sunday after the Raiders lose, Shedeur Sanders tweets out "Thank you, God" or something like that. And I just get a feeling that Shedeur would love to be a Raider. He would love to play in Vegas. He would love the bright lights. Tom Brady being on the ownership team. You know, make fun of what is it? Mark Davis, his funny haircut. And also something I've realized about Deion Sanders is like people are sometimes like, Deion Sanders is actually a pretty good coach. He's just had his son on his team. That's the only reason why he's had any success. He happens to have a son who is an all-star, phenomenal athlete, and he knows that that's his meal ticket. And the second that his son declares for the NFL, he says, "I'm going to the Raiders. We're going to be the Raiders head coach. We're going to draft Shedeur. He's going to Eli Manning his way out of every team. So it's going to be Deion hired as the head coach, Shedeur drafted in the first round by the Las Vegas Raiders."
Do you want me to address this?
I would love it.
First of all, I saw the tweet too. I believe he just thanks God every Sunday and the Raiders just lose. Like that's just that's just what happens.
Yeah.
It's the Lord's day, but the Lord is not a Raiders fan.
Yeah. Look, I think that they're going to be in the market for a new head coach. I don't think Deion's going to coach the NFL. I think he would be a terrible coach. That would not stop the Raiders from hiring him, to be clear. I think they're going to hire Cliff Kingsbury, Tom Brady's former teammate in New England.
That's not going to go well.
I am strangely into it, but check back with me in a month to see if like his offense has fallen off again. But yeah,
but you're not into Deion.
No, absolutely not.
I think it'd be so fun, so entertaining to see Deion Sanders coach in the NFL, but I don't see it happening, man. And look, I think he has strengths as a head coach, as a recruiter, as someone who can connect with his players. I just don't think that his strengths are what pro teams value in their head coaches. And look, Coach Prime, for better or for worse, is a force. And unless some team is really willing to get, to borrow your word from earlier, innovative, I just don't know that they're ready to sign up for that and break the mold to that degree.
Do not listen to them. You are 100% right. Yes, I think he would be a fantastic NFL coach along the lines, let's bring it full circle, like you said, along the lines of the Dan Campbell thing. Totally. He can be that motivator leader. Let's get him to, and this is important, we need to get him two really good coordinators in there as well. Yeah. But he can be that face of the franchise. He can be that leader, that motivator. I would love to see this happen, and I actually think he could be successful in the NFL.
To be clear, I want to see it happen. I just don't think it will.
Can you imagine him in the those cool Raiders jackets on the sidelines?
I mean, he'd look good in anything,
look awesome.
Man. He's prime time.
Look,
all
man,
right,
don't do this to me.
We're moving on, lads. We're moving on. We're getting ready to go home really quickly. Earlier in the show, we talked about the Saints' loss to the Panthers this past weekend. It was a nightmare game featuring two of the worst teams in the entire NFL, but it did produce something good. After the game, Saints defensive tackle Colin Saunders went off on Twitter and posted this absolute gem. You can see it there on the screen, and I quote, "If that was a college bowl game, that expletive would have been called the Cottonelle DooDoo Bowl. We just lost the Cottonelle DooDoo Bowl. Shaking my head. That right there.
That's one of the best tweets ever.
Dude, it is a masterclass in posting, and I want to shamelessly, unapologetically steal that and use it right here. Henceforth, we should start referring to the NFL's worst game of the week as the DooDoo Bowl. And Wilkins, you have the honor this week of making the nomination, the inaugural nomination, who is playing in this week's DooDoo Bowl.
Our DooDoo Bowl is absolutely positively the Panthers and the Giants.
Yep.
A lot of good games in the league this week. This was an easy pick. And honestly, it's just hilarious to me that the NFL put this game in Germany, just thinking that these teams and these quarterbacks were going to be the one to grow the game on an international stage. Look, I'm going to be watching because I'm a sicko, but if anyone wants to sleep in on Sunday morning, feel free because this is going to be rough.
I wasn't in the conversation about adding this segment to the show, so I had no clue this was going to happen before this morning when I found out. I'm going to add another wrinkle to it. I want to go the other way. I want to be the one who's trying to talk you into watching this game. I think there are some pretty exciting things about this game. No? You don't think so? Like the Panthers side. We might get Jonathan Brooks out there this week. And I know Chuba Hubbard just signed a new contract, and it looks like now Chuba's going to be the guy. But hey, the Panthers, let's see if they can do anything down the stretch. They have all these rookies in Xavier Legette, in Jalen Coker. Now let's see if Brooks gets out there. I think, and it's probably because of the fantasy aspect, but I think this game does have some things that I want to see in it.
Do you also like preseason football?
Sadly, yes.
There we go.
Like
we figured it
XFL
out.
football?
I don't think there's a game out there in the NFL that I wouldn't want to watch, so that's why that'll be my addition to these segments.
And I totally missed that this game's being played in Germany. In that case, we're going to call this the Shiza Bowl. All right. That'll about do it. There's only one thing left to do, fellas. It's trivia time. Zach, you're a newcomer to the show, so basically, it's one and done. This is high-stakes trivia. You get one wrong, and you're out. Here we go. Today's question. Joe Burrow has multiple 5 passing touchdown games on the season. Can you name the 10 other quarterbacks with multiple 5 TD games in a season since 2000? I'll give it to you one more time. Joe Burrow has multiple 5 passing touchdown games on the season. Can you name the 10 other quarterbacks with multiple 5 touchdown games in a season since 2000? This century. Boone, you're up first.
Ben Roethlisberger.
Correct. He did it in 2014.
I would like to, can I give a brief reason why I know
Sure.
that? I got interviewed by a pretty big newspaper one time, and it was after the first game that Roethlisberger had thrown 5 touchdowns. And I was explaining sort of my process, and I said, recency bias is a big problem. And I said, for example, Ben Roethlisberger just threw for, it was like 5 or 6 touchdowns. There's no possible way that's going to happen again next week. They quoted me in it, and then he went out and he threw for like 6 touchdowns a week after, and I felt quite
That's
foolish.
an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
Great choice to kick it off with Big Ben. He did it in 2014. Zach, who you got?
It's got to be Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning's got to be on the list.
He did it 3 times. He did it in 2003, 2004, and 2013. Correct.
Tom Brady.
Of course, correct. He did it in 2007 and in 2021.
Now we're in the dredges. Now I'm scared.
We're getting
I'm
closer.
scared now.
Getting
I'm
closer
scared
to the
now.
dredges.
I want to go with I'm going to throw out the Art Monk style one here. Nick Foles. Oh, he did it once. I
You
know he
threw
did
the
it
Hail
once.
Mary.
I was gonna say-
You
I
threw
was
the
gonna say
Philly
Nick Foles
special
was-
and it didn't
I
hit.
tried
He
for it.
had
I
the
went
7
for it.
touchdown game, so
Yeah,
it was
he
a good
had
call.
the one.
Yeah.
I thought there might have been 2.
Boone is out. 2-horse race. Zach.
Mahomes had to have done it in that year where he threw like 49 touchdowns or whatever. So I'm going to say Patrick Mahomes.
Correct. He did it in both 2018 and in 2021.
Drew Brees.
Correct. He did it in 2009 and in 2011.
Okay. Aaron Rodgers.
What? Shockingly, Aaron Rodgers only has like 4 5 touchdown games in his entire career.
Wow.
And never did it multiple times in the same season, which means, Wilkie, you get one and you're the champ.
Since what year?
Since 2000, this century.
I'm going to try to go bold here. Lamar Jackson?
Correct.
Wow.
Lamar did it in his first MVP season of 2019. Wilkie is the champion
Another
once
dub.
again.
Add it to the list.
Well earned. Another big dub for Big Dub. Here are the ones you guys missed. Russell Wilson.
Wow.
He did it twice. He did it in 2015 and in 2020.
Crazy.
Never would have guessed that.
Cam Newton also did it in 2015. Matt Stafford did it in 2011.
Yeah.
Shout out Megatron. And
Oh.
2004, Dante Culpepper.
No way.
Yes.
Yeah, put some
that's a
respect
good one.
on Dante
That's a good
Culpepper's
one.
name.
Dante Culpepper is one of my all-time guys. I love Dante
Madden
Culpepper.
04 legend, Minnesota Vikings legend. Maybe not on the same level as Sam Darnold, but, he did his best. Fellas, great effort today. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of No Timeouts. Once again, that's Justin Boone. That's Zach McDonald. That is Dan Wilkins. And my name is Jonah Birenbaum. We'll see you next time.